Having garnered a reputation for being prompt and reliable, Todd accepted a route for an urgent toy shipment to be completed overnight. He'd done these kinds of hauls before, long, lonely hours on quiet roads where the darkness seemed endless, broken only by the piercing beams of his headlights and the occasional flicker of roadside signs. This job, though, felt different right from the start. The air was heavier tonight, thicker, somehow, clinging to the truck as he cut through the winding country road. The sky above was a deep, velvety black, the stars swallowed by low-hanging clouds that didn't seem to move. The headlights of his 18-wheeler carved long tunnels into the dark, illuminating nothing but the cracked asphalt ahead and the endless rows of trees flanking either side of the road. Towering pines loomed in the darkness, their spindly branches clawing upward as though reaching for something unseen. Todd kept the radio low, the soft hum of a local country station a weak attempt to drown out the silence that had crept into the cab. It was the kind of quiet that wasn't peaceful, but oppressive, something that crawled under the skin, leaving behind a subtle itch. His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel as he maneuvered the massive truck around a gentle curve, the headlights spilling across the landscape in sweeping arcs, revealing little more than empty road and shadow-laden trees. Around 3 a.m., the feeling hit him. At first, it was just a faint tightness in his chest, like he'd taken a sharp breath and forgotten to let it out. Then, a cold, creeping sensation spread through his ribcage, sinking into his gut, heavy and low. It wasn't a stabbing pain or anything he could physically place, just an uneasiness that swelled in his stomach and slithered up his spine. His fingers twitched against the wheel, a slight shiver crawling through his arms despite the heat gently humming through the vents. He glanced at the dashboard clock again. 3 a.m. The witching hour. His grandfather used to talk about that, the time when the veil between the living and the dead was supposed to be at its thinnest. Todd had always dismissed it as old folklore, spooky stories passed down through generations to explain the unexplainable. Still, his throat felt dry, and he swallowed hard, trying to shake the tightening coil of anxiety that curled in his chest. Stupid, he muttered under his breath, tightening his grip on the wheel as if anchoring himself to reality. But the feeling didn't pass. It grew heavier, like a slow, invisible pressure settling across his shoulders. The road ahead stretched endlessly, its cracked surface slick with moisture from a fog that had started to creep in, curling in thin, smoky tendrils along the edges of the asphalt. It was subtle at first, just a faint mist skimming the ground, but it thickened with alarming speed, rising in ghostly ribbons that swirled beneath the high beams. The fog came on fast, faster than nature allowed. Todd squinted through the windshield, leaning forward in his seat as though that would somehow push the beams further. The road blurred into an indistinct smear of gray, and the towering silhouettes of the trees began to fade into the mist, their outlines dissolving into strange, jagged shadows. A knot tightened in his stomach. Something felt wrong. Fog didn't roll in this quickly, not out here, not like this. It spread in slow drifts, meandering across fields and roads, not this sudden, this aggressive. He reached instinctively for the radio, clicking it on and twisting the dial in hopes of picking up chatter from another driver nearby. But there was only static, a dry, whispering hiss that filled the cab like breath against glass. He drummed his fingers against the steering wheel, trying to push away the sense of isolation that was growing by the second. There wasn't a soul on this road. Not another pair of headlights in sight. No roadside lights. No towns for miles. It was just him, the truck, and the tightening fog. The uneasy feeling deepened. His chest felt heavy now, his heartbeat slow but forceful, each thud a steady, deliberate drum. The mist thickened until it pressed against the windshield in dense waves, the high beams useless now, swallowed entirely. The road disappeared beneath the fog, leaving him driving blind, with only muscle memory and the faintest hint of the centerline guiding him. A soft pattering sound touched the edges of his awareness, a light, rhythmic tapping against the roof of the cab. At first, he thought it was rain, but when he looked out, the sky was dry. The tapping continued, deliberate now, like the soft beat of fingers against metal. Todd's throat tightened. His mind raced to rationalize it, branches maybe. But the trees were too far off the road, and the tapping was too consistent, too precise. He clenched his jaw and eased his foot off the gas. The tapping stopped. The truck rumbled in strained silence, its tires rolling over the slick, hidden road, the sound of the engine hollow in the heavy fog. Todd's eyes darted to the side mirror. Nothing. The fog was too thick, clinging to the sides of the cab like a living thing, obscuring everything beyond a few feet. He focused back on the road, or where he hoped the road still was, and tried to calm his racing thoughts. It's just fog, he told himself. Just a heavy patch. But the unease in his chest coiled tighter, gnawing at the edges of his rational mind. The fog was swallowing sound now too. The hum of the tires against the road faded, and the engine's growl felt distant, as though it was being sucked into the mist. The only sound that remained sharp and clear was the thudding of his own heart, hard and insistent in his ears. The headlights flickered. Once. Twice. Then steady again. Todd's breath caught. Electrical issue? He didn't have time to consider the thought before a dense wall of fog surged forward, swallowing the entire cab. It hit like a wave, thick and choking, blanketing the windshield in an opaque sheet. He slammed on the brakes, the rig's massive body groaning as it fought inertia, tires skidding slightly against the slick road before the truck came to a grinding halt. The fog wrapped around the truck in heavy, pulsing waves. Todd sat there, the silence pressing against him, thick and absolute. Then, the engine sputtered. It coughed once, twice, before cutting out entirely. The cab went dark. The headlights snuffed out like a candle. The dashboard lights faded to black. Even the gentle hum of the heater died, leaving Todd encased in thick, cold silence. His breath plumed in the freezing air, curling in thin streams toward the ceiling of the cab. The tapping sound returned, louder now, more insistent. But this time, it wasn't on the roof. It was on the driver's side window. Soft. Rhythmic. Like fingernails. Todd's heart hammered in his chest, the pounding echoing in his ears as his hand inched toward the window crank. He stopped. Every instinct screamed don't. But something deeper, something more primal, compelled him to look. The fog outside swirled violently now, spinning in tight circles, the mist moving with purpose rather than drifting aimlessly. The tapping grew louder, echoing through the heavy air. Todd's throat worked as he swallowed hard, his breath shallow. Then, without thinking, he cranked the window down, just an inch. Cold air poured in, biting in sharp. The tapping stopped. The silence was deafening. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, from deep within the fog, a sound echoed, a shrill, high-pitched giggle. It was thin and broken, like the distorted cackle of a child's laughter run through static, rising and falling in sharp, jarring bursts. Todd's blood ran cold. The giggle was followed by another. And another. Dozens now. The fog came alive with it, laughter swirling all around the cab, high-pitched and maniacal, growing louder, circling him like vultures. Todd slammed the window shut. His fingers scrambled for the ignition. He twisted the key. The engine coughed but refused to turn over. The laughter swelled. It was all around him now, deep and hollow, vibrating through the steel of the cab. Todd slammed his fist against the dashboard. "Come on," he hissed. He twisted the key again. The engine roared to life. The headlights flared, slicing through the fog. But the laughter didn't stop. Not until he floored the gas and the rig lurched forward, tearing through the wall of mist. As he sped down the endless stretch of road, the fog thinned slowly, the oppressive weight of it lifting. But in the distance, far behind him, the shrill laughter still echoed, faint but lingering, as though whatever had found him wasn't done yet. Todd's feelings of uneasiness increased as a thin fog became a thick fog, and a thick fog became a wall of smoke. Unable to see much of anything, he pulled his rig to the side of the road and decided to wait out the cloud. No other vehicles passed as he sat in strained silence for several minutes. Just as Todd considered calling someone for help, his truck began to quiver and sputter, the deep, familiar rumble of the diesel engine choking into uneven coughs. The dashboard lights flickered in a stuttering sequence, once, twice, before fading into blackness, leaving the cab submerged in a heavy, suffocating dark. The entire truck convulsed as though gripped by something unseen, the steering wheel vibrating violently beneath his hands. The engine gave one final, agonized groan before it died entirely. Total silence followed. Todd sat frozen, his fingers clenched around the wheel, his breath trapped tight in his chest. A hollow, gut-wrenching stillness filled the cab, an emptiness so profound it felt like the entire world had fallen away. His heart raced, drumming wildly against his ribs, each beat an agonizing thud in the suffocating quiet. This can't be happening. Instinct kicked in. He snatched the CB radio, the cold plastic rough against his trembling hands, and thumbed the switch. "Breaker, breaker, this is Truck 97. I'm stuck out on Route 83. Can anyone hear me? Repeat, anyone out there?" Nothing. Not even static. The line was dead. Panic clawed at the back of his throat. He grabbed his cell phone from the dashboard, the screen lighting up with a dull, cold blue, no service. He tilted it, waved it in the air, desperate for even a single bar of reception, but the signal was gone, eaten by the fog that now pressed like a living thing against the cab windows. The breath that had been trapped inside his lungs came out in a harsh exhale, but before he could fully process the situation, an unnatural cold washed through the cab. It was subtle at first, a thin, chilling draft slipping through unseen cracks, but it grew colder, sinking into his skin, his bones. Frost webbed out in delicate, spidery patterns across the inside of the windshield, crystallizing in seconds. Then, without warning, the laughter began. It was soft at first, high-pitched, delicate, like the far-off giggle of a child, but it multiplied, cascading into a chorus of twisted, shrill cackles. The sound clawed through the thick fog, vibrating through the steel walls of the cab, surrounding him. It echoed in every direction, rising and falling, each burst sharp and jarring, as if mocking him. It was laughter, but there was no joy in it, just malice, a deep, ancient cruelty that crawled under his skin. Todd's body locked tight with dread, his throat dry, every muscle rigid as the laughter grew louder, closer. It wasn't coming from a single source. It was everywhere, above him, behind him, seeping through the very metal of the truck. His mind raced for rational explanations. Kids? A prank, but none of it made sense. He was miles from the nearest town, in the middle of nowhere, wrapped in a fog so thick it devoured even sound. This isn't normal. His heart pounded furiously, sweat slicking the palms of his hands despite the cold that bit at his skin. The laughter rose to a fevered pitch, shrill and chaotic, before stopping, abrupt, brutal, in a breathless silence. And in that moment, he heard it. Tap. 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 The sound came from the passenger side window. Todd turned his head slowly, the movement stiff and mechanical, every instinct in him screaming, "Don't look." But he couldn't stop himself. His eyes widened as he stared into the fog-shrouded glass, where 5 small indentations pressed against the window, tiny, splayed fingertips, barely larger than a child's. They slid downward in slow, deliberate streaks, leaving trails of condensation in their wake. Another set of fingers appeared beside them. Then another. Tiny hands, dozens of them, pressing against the glass from the outside, clawing at it, dragging along the pane in slow, scraping patterns. Todd's vision blurred with rising panic as the laughter exploded again, sharper now, closer, right outside the cab. He twisted in his seat, his elbow knocking the horn. The blast was deafening in the fog, but it was swallowed almost immediately, dampened into a low moan, like the sound had been smothered before it could echo. The tiny hands vanished. But the fog thickened. Swirling faster now, it bled through the gaps in the door frame, curling into the cabin thin, ghostly tendrils. The temperature plummeted further, breath freezing midair in front of his face. His ears rang with the lingering echoes of the laughter, but something deeper now rumbled beneath it, a guttural, throaty growl, low and wet, vibrating through the metal floor. Todd tried the ignition again. The key twisted uselessly. The engine didn't even cough this time. The growl deepened. The passenger side mirror clouded with fog before clearing slightly, and through it, he saw them. Silhouettes in the mist. Small, hunched figures, no taller than a child, lining the edge of the road. There were dozens, maybe more, each one standing impossibly still, their forms dark and lumpy, as if wrapped in tattered cloth or mud-caked rags. Their heads tilted at strange angles, too far to be natural, bones bending where they shouldn't. One of them stepped forward. Todd's breath caught in his throat as the figure reached out, a thin arm extending toward the cab. Its fingers were long, jointed in too many places, curling and uncurling in a grotesque, beckoning motion. Then, another hand slammed against the glass. This time it was larger, pale and slick with something dark, streaking across the window in violent smears. A second followed, clawing at the side of the cab with an eerie patience, its fingers tapping in an offbeat rhythm. The laughter returned, softer now, as though the figures outside were restraining themselves, savoring the moment. Todd's body moved on instinct. He flung open the driver's side door, nearly tumbling out onto the frozen dirt below. His boots crunched on the gravel, the cold slamming into him, but he didn't stop. The fog curled around him, wrapping its clammy fingers against his skin, but he pushed forward, stumbling toward the tree line that bordered the road. Behind him, the laughter swelled once more, violent and wild, chasing him through the thick mist. The trees stretched tall and black against the haze, their skeletal branches clawing at the sky. Todd shoved through the underbrush, breath tearing through his lungs in ragged gasps. The laughter faded as he pushed deeper into the woods, but something worse took its place, a dragging sound, heavy and wet, moving through the leaves, following him. He didn't look back. Branches snapped at his jacket, brambles clawed at his boots, but he kept running until he stumbled into a clearing, falling hard onto his hands and knees. The fog was thinner here, drifting lazily above the ground, revealing old stone ruins scattered across the clearing, low walls, weathered pillars, broken statues with their faces worn away by time. And there, in the center, was something else. A ring of stones, blackened with soot, surrounding a pit of charred earth. Todd's breath caught as he realized the ground was littered with small bones, tiny, brittle remains, scattered in haphazard piles. A faint, sickly sweet smell hung in the air, burned wood, damp soil, and something metallic, something wrong. The dragging sound grew louder. Todd staggered backward, but his foot caught on a stone, sending him sprawling onto the cold ground. He scrambled to stand, but a voice, soft and lilting, echoed through the clearing. "Stay." It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. The laughter returned, softer now, full of teeth. Todd didn't know how he made it back to the truck. His memories of the woods blurred into flashes of twisted trees and clawed branches, of shrill giggles that danced in the fog. But somehow, he found himself back in the cab. The fog had receded. The truck roared to life on the first turn of the key. Todd didn't wait. He slammed his foot on the gas, the tires spitting gravel as the rig tore down the road, leaving the fog behind. But even as the night cleared and the stars reappeared above, Todd's hands wouldn't stop shaking. The laughter echoed in his mind, lingering like a bad dream, one that refused to fade. Todd sped away, holding firm to what he felt and witnessed that odd night in Kentucky. The roar of the truck's engine filled the cab, but it did little to drown out the residual thrum of fear that still vibrated through his body. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles blanched, the rough texture of the leather digging into his palms. The headlights carved thin, wavering tunnels through the dissipating fog, but the darkness beyond seemed somehow deeper now, heavier, as if it remembered what had happened, as if it watched him still. The road stretched on, a ribbon of cracked asphalt twisting through dense woods, the silhouettes of bare trees clawing skyward like skeletal fingers. The fog was thinning, but it lingered in patches, hanging low along the ditches and swirling in lazy eddies across the blacktop. Todd didn't dare slow down. Every nerve in his body screamed for distance, for space, for anything that would put a barrier between him and what he had just fled. The laughter still echoed in his mind, thin, high-pitched, inhuman, and no matter how far he drove, it felt like it clung to him, like some part of it had seeped into the cab, riding with him now. He kept his foot on the gas, the speedometer creeping past 70, then 80, the big rig's engine groaning under the strain of the heavy trailer behind him. The road curved sharply, and he took it too fast. The wheels skidded, the whole truck lurching to the side, but he yanked the wheel back just in time, tires screeching as he forced the rig into submission. His heart thudded hard in his chest, sweat trickling down the side of his face despite the cold. The CB radio crackled weakly, static fizzing through the speaker, and for a split second, hope surged through him. He snatched the mic. "Breaker, breaker, this is Truck 97, anyone out there?" He hesitated, glancing at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the fog swelling behind him again, the shadowy figures trailing in its wake. "I ran into something. Something's not right out here. Anyone copy?" Silence. Then a burst of static. And through it, a voice, distant, thin, warped like it was coming from underwater. "You shouldn't have stopped." Todd's blood turned to ice. He dropped the mic like it had burned him, the plastic clattering against the dashboard as the radio hissed into silence again. The voice wasn't familiar. It wasn't anyone from dispatch or another driver. It was colder, older, threaded with something that didn't belong in this world. He risked another glance in the mirror. The road behind him stretched long and empty, the asphalt shimmering faintly in the moonlight, the fog now a distant smear dissolving into the trees. But in the very back of the reflection, where the glow of his taillights bled into the darkness, there was movement. Something low and fast, skimming the edges of the road. He couldn't make it out, not clearly, but the shape was wrong, too fluid, like it didn't obey the same rules of form and weight that everything else did. Todd's foot pressed harder on the gas. The road began to slope upward, a steep incline winding through the dense hills, and he prayed the old rig could hold the speed. The gears whined in protest, but the truck kept climbing, the roar of the engine masking the sounds behind him, if there were still any. He didn't want to know. He just needed to keep moving. But the fog, thin as it had been, began to creep in again. Not thick, not blinding, but enough to lace the edges of the road, thin tendrils slithering across the asphalt like reaching fingers. It curled around the tires, slid across the windshield in faint smears, and the temperature inside the cab dropped, frost spidering across the corners of the glass. "It's following me," Todd realized. The road leveled out at the top of the hill, the tree line falling away to reveal a broad stretch of farmland, fields stretching wide beneath the pale moonlight, the rows of crops skeletal in the off-season, long stalks shivering in the wind. A battered wooden sign loomed at the side of the road, its paint chipped and faded, Hollow Creek, population 438. The lights of the town flickered in the distance. Todd didn't slow. The town felt like safety, or at least like something that wasn't the endless, empty road. He could see the faint glow of streetlights, the red pinpricks of taillights from parked cars, a gas station sign buzzing weakly in the distance. Civilization. People. But even as he approached, something gnawed at him. The fog thickened again, just a little, but it was enough to make the town lights flicker oddly, dimming and brightening in uneven bursts. The truck's headlights warped against the mist, their beams bending unnaturally, and as Todd passed the first row of shuttered shops, he noticed something that stopped his breath cold. The town was silent. There were no people. No cars on the road. No lights in the windows. The gas station's fluorescent sign buzzed and flickered, but the pump stood empty, the small convenience store dark inside. It was like the town had been hollowed out. The fog coiled tightly between the buildings, thicker now, the air heavy with it, dense enough that even the truck's high beams couldn't cut far ahead. The sense of wrongness deepened, thick, oily dread settling in Todd's chest like a stone. And then he saw them. Figures. Dozens of them. Standing at the edges of the road, in doorways, behind shattered windows, tall and still, their forms barely visible through the fog. They didn't move. Didn't blink. Just stood there, their faces shadowed, their limbs long and too thin, like they'd been stretched out of shape. Todd slammed the brakes. The rig skidded hard, tires screeching against the asphalt as the truck came to a jerking stop in the middle of the town square. The cab lurched forward, the seatbelt cutting into his chest as he gasped for breath. But the figure still didn't move. He sat there, frozen in place, his breath fogging the windshield. And then, one of the figures tilted its head. The motion was small, almost delicate, but it sent a bolt of raw terror through Todd. It was the same head tilt he'd seen back in the fog, from the shapes on the side of the road. Slow. Curious. They followed me here. The thought was a hammer in his skull. Before he could react, the CB crackled again, the speaker hissing with static. But this time, there was no voice, just the same shrill, broken laughter that had chased him through the fog, high and wild and hungry. Todd slammed the truck into gear. The tires spun before gripping the road, and the rig lurched forward, barreling down the street, past the still figures. But they began to move now, not fast, but smoothly, gliding through the fog like they were part of it, their forms unraveling at the edges, smoke bleeding off their limbs as they drifted toward the truck. He didn't look back. The town fell away behind him as he hit the outskirts, the fog finally thinning into clear night air. But the laughter, thin and broken, still echoed in the back of his mind. It followed him all the way to the next town, where he finally pulled the truck into the lot of an all-night diner, the parking lot bright and empty. He sat there in the cab, engine idling, his hands trembling on the steering wheel as the weight of what had happened crashed down around him. The fog hadn't followed. Not this time. But Todd knew better now. It wasn't the place. It wasn't the road. It had been the moment, the crossroads where fear met courage, where the unknown clawed at him and he chose to fight through it. The darkness had reached for him, and though it had come close, closer than he ever wanted to admit, he had pulled free. He sat in the quiet hum of the truck, the lights of the all-night diner casting soft halos against the fog-streaked windshield. For the first time since that terrible night began, he noticed something that had escaped him before. The sky was beginning to clear. The dense, suffocating fog that had hunted him through the Kentucky backroads was gone now, leaving behind only thin wisps that curled lazily in the beams of the parking lot lights. Above, a single star blinked through the blackness, faint but steady. Todd exhaled, a shaky breath that felt like it had been trapped in his chest for hours. He reached for the door handle and stepped out onto the cool pavement. The air smelled like damp earth and diesel, ordinary and grounding. In the distance, crickets chirped, a sound so normal, so alive, it made his throat tighten with emotion. He stood there for a moment, letting the chill seep into his skin, letting the silence stretch wide and calm. The oppressive heaviness was gone. The feeling of being watched had lifted, leaving only the vast, quiet emptiness of the Kentucky night. Inside the diner, the faint clink of silverware and the low hum of conversation drifted through the glass. There were people here, real people, sitting under buzzing neon lights, sipping coffee, living their lives, untouched by the darkness he'd barely escaped. Todd felt the pull of that normalcy like gravity, something solid and familiar after the unreal horrors of the road. He walked inside. The bell above the door jingled, sharp and bright. A waitress with tired eyes and a kind smile glanced up from behind the counter. "Coffee?" she asked, her voice cutting through the haze still lingering in his mind. Todd hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah. Black." He slid into a booth by the window, where he could still see the truck parked outside, still whole, still his. The waitress set the coffee down in front of him, the steam curling up in soft, delicate threads. He wrapped his hands around the cup, feeling its warmth chase away the cold still lingering in his fingertips. He didn't know how long he sat there, staring out at the truck, at the darkened road that led back into the fog-drenched nightmare he'd left behind. But as the sky began to pale with the first hints of dawn, painting soft streaks of pink and gold along the horizon, he realized something profound. He had made it. The fog hadn't followed. Whatever had clawed at him in the dark, whatever ancient thing had whispered through the mist and laughed in the hollow places between heartbeats, it hadn't won. It hadn't broken him. He wasn't trapped. The road was still there, waiting. And so was he. With a deep breath, Todd finished the last of his coffee, the bitter warmth grounding him in the present. He stood, stretching the stiffness from his shoulders, and tossed a few crumpled bills onto the table. The waitress nodded at him, a small, knowing smile on her face. Maybe she'd seen the hollow look in his eyes. Maybe she understood in that quiet, unseen way people sometimes did. Outside, the sun was finally cresting the horizon, its pale light washing the landscape in soft gold. Todd climbed back into his truck, the seat cold but familiar beneath him. He gripped the steering wheel, feeling its solidity, the realness of it, and this time when he turned the key, the engine roared to life without hesitation. The laughter was gone. The fog was gone. And for the first time in hours, Todd felt the heavy knot of fear in his chest loosen, unraveling into something lighter, something almost like peace. He drove on, the road stretching wide and empty before him, the dawn chasing the last of the shadows away. The nightmare was behind him now, lost somewhere in the endless Kentucky backroads, where it would wait for the next lost traveler, the next wandering soul who didn't know when to turn back. But Todd did. He grinned to himself, small and bitter at first, but growing warmer as the miles rolled under his wheels. Whatever had found him in that fog had lost. And this time, it wasn't laughing,